How do you and I even know that when we look at the sky, the blue I'm seeing is the same as the blue you're seeing?
That is wild that you say that. I had this conversation with my wife 2 weeks ago, right? Have you ever thought about the fact that colors are just these made up things? And yes, we know them as orange, blue, but what if my blue is your orange? She
Yeah.
looked at me like I was crazy.
Welcome to the Let Me Save You 25 Years podcast. I am your host, Shawn David Nelson. And I first just need to say thank you. Thank you so much for listening, for sharing this, for commenting. I'm loving all the feedback on social media, my Instagram. I live on that. DM me if you want to stay in touch. You've built this podcast. And look, I think my platform advertises a little bit on it, but I just do it for you. I just want to share this awesome content with the world. I think I've got amazing guests and we have pretty cool conversations. Selfishly, I love this one. Oh my gosh, you're going to die today. It's solid. Look, Shawnism for today, just roll with it. This is something I feel very deeply about. I think of this phrase each day. I try to coach my kids using this phrase, because some of them are more flexible than others. Some of them are really, uptight at times. My children, that is, where I'm super flexible, and I've learned to just roll with it. And the analogy I always use is surfing. I can't really call myself a surfer. I learned how to surf, in my late 40s, really. But I can surf and I can ride a wave. And if you're a surfer, like surfing's not really the problem. It's getting out, especially when it's big, especially when it's, tight sets. I mean, if you've ever paddled out in like the wintertime, springtime, Huntington Beach, take your pick, Pacific Ocean, it's cold. It's just incessant. Like there is no break. And man, like your shoulders are just burning, and the good. And of course the pros just make it look easy. They're duck diving under the waves. My board's too big to even duck dive. And you just have to keep swimming. You just have to keep swimming, even though like your shoulders were burnt 60 seconds ago, 2 minutes ago, you thought you couldn't go on anymore. And then you finally get out, you recover. Heaven forbid you dare to like paddle for a wave. Heaven forbid you catch one, because on the other end of that is just another paddle out. And probably if you're as bad as me, 50% of the time you're getting rocked. I mean, you might get up, but on, a big set, you are getting hurled, slammed into the stand, turned. And in those moments, if you panic, you will run out of air real fast, and you'll be paddling for the surface and not find it. You might be paddling the wrong way. And you quickly learn that the only right way to deal with the vicissitudes of life, to stretch the metaphor back to reality, is to just let it toss you. Stay calm in the face of the worst kind and most terrifying adversity, and just tumble. Just roll with it. And you will float up. You can find your leash and yank yourself up, and you'll be able to, fight another day. You'll be able to paddle back out, or you'll be able to ride the whitewash in. But if you fight it in those moments, that's when it gets scary. And learning how to roll with it in life, learning how to just let the wave throw you for as long as it takes, learning how to then do it again, and even learn to enjoy it. That's what this podcast is about. We unpack it with one of the best six packs on the planet. No, our guest today, you're going to love Steve Cook. Like famous from The Biggest Loser, famous from fitness culture, world-renowned bodybuilder. Of course, with that comes the positive outlook, like that you'd expect from a person that, isn't built like me, that basically built his career on coaching people that look like me to look less like me. No, it's just an amazing conversation. I think you're going to love it. We'll break down how adaptability is the secret to rolling with it. And not all of us are predisposed to that. Some of us, we have to really work on it. How to determine when to push through and when to let it roll past. The pressure to be perfect almost always works against us and our goals. Just like in fitness and in life, pushing too hard will come at a cost, and the value of enjoying the journey, because good or bad, sometimes the destination is not what we think it is. Steve breaks this down in perfect detail. This is a guru of fitness, a guru of mindset, and I brought him here to you today. Enjoy. Our guest today is someone who knows a thing or two about pushing limits, bouncing back, and inspiring millions along the way. You'll know him as one of the most recognized names in fitness, an IFBB pro, entrepreneur, coach, YouTube sensation, and all-around force in the health and wellness space, having been a coach on NBC's The Biggest Loser. But what people love most about this guy isn't just his workouts, it's his realness. He's been through highs and lows. He's learned sometimes that life isn't about, trying to fight every wave, but learning how to roll with it. When tough times come, as they always do, it's not just about panicking or trying to control every second. It's about staying calm, letting those waves roll past us, and trusting that you'll come up for air when the time is right. Please welcome to the pod, Mr. Fitness Culture himself, Steve Cook.
Wow. That was a hell of an intro. I appreciate that. Thank you so much. Excited to be on.
It's all true, man. It's all true.
Oh, you're a good hype man.
I can follow you around and just do that. You flex, and I'll be like the short, stubby guy behind you, hyping you up.
I love it.
So, without giving it too much thought, Steve, when you heard this week's Shawnism, roll with it, what's the first thing that came to mind?
Setbacks in life. Losing the Olympia was the first thing that kind of came to my mind. Is we all have a plan, and what happens when you get punched in the mouth, that plan changes, and I think that that's going to be one of the things that across the board as a human, it will happen in your life. And what do you do from that? And I think, again, one of my favorite quotes has always been, life is essentially, 10% of what happens to us and 90% how we react to things. And that went along with, rolling with it. If you sit there and you're always trying to fight life, trying to, impose your own will on things, at times you're going to be just beat up and worn out. So how can you, take what comes, digest it, not always react to things. It doesn't mean you always have to be reactive, but, how can you, allow yourself to stay calm and pivot when you need to pivot, and then also push back when you need to push back.
Awesome overview. It's cool hearing it come from a guy like you who's known for pushing people. He's known for pushing through. It's always that last rep, that last set. And here you are, talking about not pushing through, right? And I think that's a really cool thing to hear, because it just shows all of the great people who have achieved greatness, and you've achieved greatness in your own realm. It's multidimensional. It's not as simple as just grit or just pushing through. So how do you determine, when you ram it through?
Yeah.
And when you let it roll past?
I think in life, we always strive for this word balance. And I'll speak to this. Think of, January 1st. What happens? Everyone wants to jump into the gym. Hey, I'm going to eat perfect. I'm going to lift 5 days a week. And inevitably by mid-February, people have failed. And now they're feeling worse about themselves. And
hold on. I got to know, as a gym owner, because,
yes.
Fitness Culture, my wife's there every day.
Yep.
I lean on the dirt bike for my workouts, admittedly, but do you actually see that? Is that a real thing? Like, do you see these signups? Yeah.
Oh yeah. No, gyms make their money. January is always by and far.
That's a real thing.
For sure. And even
okay,
so our main business is actually the fitness app, and we see that as well. Like our biggest onboarding of clientele is in January, because again, everyone loves this idea of starting fresh, and it's not to say that that's bad. It's just how we go about it. It's this all or nothing. Like I've been there. When I was competing, I went through this all or nothing. I'm going to be perfect with counting out my macros, and hitting all of my workouts. And then what happens is, again, getting back to the January thing, is inevitably you screw up, it's not sustainable. And what happens is you feel like a failure, you throw in the towel, and you end up gaining back the weight that you might have lost doing it unhealthy. And so again, this idea of pushing through always and fighting this uphill battle, rather than, hey, let's figure out in fitness terms, what type of workouts do you like doing? Let's figure out, well, okay, I don't like to use the word necessarily diet, but let's try to figure out how we can not say you can't eat this, you can't eat that. I'm a huge proponent of flexible dieting, and what that means is basically I'm fueling my body with things that I know are going to be good for it. But I also realize that at the end of the day, we have sugars, carbohydrates, proteins, fats. We need all of those things in our life. And if you go out and you have a little bit of ice cream on a Friday night, we label food good and bad, but that ice cream is still, at the end of the day, sugars, carbs, and fats, and we need those things. So it's just about not having them in abundance. And so again, I think the minute we start, again, feeling like we have to push, 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 be perfect, I can't mess up, I can't, that kind of pressure that you put on yourself all of a sudden kind of just explodes, and you break down and you end up burning out. And I've been there. Like, I can tell you, I've won shows, I've shot for magazine covers, and later on that day or the next day walked around LA, ate 12 dozen donuts, because again, pushed too hard, was empty inside, and felt like, I had all this pressure that you
Mm.
tell yourself you can't have something. You inevitably, your brain starts saying like, well, I want that thing I can't have. So I
Yeah.
think it's not necessarily tricking your mind into doing things the right way, or tricking yourself into um, eating correctly. It's more about, hey, let's come at this from a rational approach and realize that this all or nothing mentality is just going to beat you up and leave you feeling useless.
I love it. And you've taken it already to a place that is a dimension of this idea of just roll with it, and to me, that's, I be easier on ourselves and be easier on those around us. I think like it's so, sometimes we can get in this mode, especially if we're any kind of achiever, where, we want results, we demand performance, and it's tricky because, of course, as an achiever, those are real things that I think are commendable, and somehow leaving room to just kind of roll with it sometimes and be a little easier on ourselves. Cause it's like when we're, I think when we push that too far, you can experience these breakdowns that can have, worse consequences than just, I slipped up here or I slipped up there.
You
All
get
of a
the
sudden
swing
it's a
back.
dozen donuts and then it's problematic.
Yes, you get the swing back, and that's what I've noticed in my life. And again, probably like you said, should be noted that we're talking about people that are type A high achievers that can push themselves, because there is definitely a time in life that requires you to be single-minded in your focus and really pushing. And I think there's been times in my life, I went through a divorce at about
Mm,
23 years old. One of those
mm,
times that I kind of, again, had to roll with it, had to stop. It,
mm,
it was a decision that, being young, we probably shouldn't have been married in the first place, and ultimately led to a divorce that I wasn't the one that instigated. I wasn't the one that necessarily, filed for divorce. But it was one of those things like, okay, what do? You kind of get punched in the mouth. What do? You can either learn from it, you can, take some feedback, you can take a good long look at yourself in the mirror and realize, okay, hey, I can be better here. But also, again, have some grace for the fact that, like, we were both young. It didn't work out. No one necessarily, needs to be the bad guy, but roll with it. What does it mean now? Well, what can I control in my life? I can control, the fact that I'm exercising, I'm eating right, I'm
mm.
going to go back to school, I'm going to better myself. So it's
Wow.
pivoting,
Mm,
and it's having a paradigm shift. And I think that when we start talking about rolling with things, it's having the ability to realize what our reality is currently, what we perceive it as, and what it really might be are two different things. And in staying in a place where where there's that conflict of what we want and what is, that leads to can lead to depression, can lead to a lot of things that that are undesirable. And that's where it can lead to binge eating, eating disorders, and all of those things. So it's about being honest and having good people around you. But it's about having the ability to roll with things, to move and pivot. And part of the reason why I love golf these days, like I've kind of transitioned, like you do your motorbike, your dirt biking, motorbiking, you do your dirt biking. I've kind of, again, I've had to pivot since I'm no longer, into competitive bodybuilding, which is such a sport where I'm imposing my will. Like I'm working out, I'm
Yeah.
moving heavy weight. The harder I try or the harder I push, the more I'm going to get out of it. To whereas golf is that juxtaposition to where you can't really care. You can't try. You don't want to try too hard
You
because
can't
tension.
force it. You
No,
can't force it.
you try to force it in golf. So there is that balance, that yin and yang of hey, there's times to push and there's times you have to be able to back off and almost let it come to you. And that's where I think golf has been such a beautiful thing for me is realizing that. And even as a
Yeah.
parent, man, I think golf came into my life as a time when like patience are such an important thing, having a baby. And I didn't always have that. I was like imposing my will as a football player, as bodybuilder, whatever, forcing things to happen. And I think that's one side of the things, but then being patient and letting things come to you, going with the flow, because man, being a parent, you learn real quickly the things that you might have set up for that day or that you want, or you envision things going a certain way. That goes out the window when you have, a screaming 14-year-old or 14-month-old on the plane and you have to pivot, maybe give them that tablet for a minute. That might be against your morals typically, but hey, put the phone in front of them.
Yeah, this is good. All such good examples. Okay, let's go with golf for a second. So, such a good example of so people ask me, look, I'm in business. I'm the CEO of a public company. There's reasons that I end up golfing or need to golf or bankers outings. Who knows? And I always tell people like, oh, I golf, but I'm not a golfer. And I enjoy it. I mean, it's beautiful. I mean, talk about like, is there any more beautiful, combination of the artificial and the natural together than a golf course, man? Just acres of green grass and animals cruising around, and it's beautiful. But it's a sport that requires so much precision, so much technique, and as you said, at the same time, and strength, even some stamina sometimes. But you can't be forced. And that's a really cool dynamic about that weird sport, especially coming from bodybuilding. It's like on the other end of the spectrum somehow.
Absolutely.
So I find that interesting. And it's so interesting to like, how do you manage the precision and the technique of it while staying loose and rolling with it? Have you any advice on how you somehow balance that?
Yeah, I've looked a lot into this. Again, I'm huge into, whether it was bodybuilding, again, figuring things out, not just on the surface level, but digging deeper. Like and I wish I could do this with all things in my life. Unfortunately, I can only do it with things that I'm truly interested and passionate about. That is kind of the downfall of maybe being ADHD and kind of a little bit OCD, is that like if I'm into something, I want to know everything about it, why it works the way it does. And in golf, again, what you're saying is absolutely true. What I've noticed is you want to practice differently than you play. When we practice, when you go and you're hitting balls, working on mechanics, there's a time for that. There's a time to go in and okay, what is my body? What is the turn looking like? What is my club face? There's you think about a golf swing, how multifaceted we have, so many joints moving, we have so many muscles moving. We're also trying to move something that's not part of our body and hit a ball 300 yards. It sounds like madness. But we practice with specific thoughts in mind, trying to keep it, no more than one or two things. But when you get out on the course, that's where the art takes in. That's where the visualization of hitting different shot shapes and also a routine. So I've noticed that a routine in golf, a pre-shot routine, is so important. Gripping the club the same each time, taking variables out of it. And I think, again, that's kind of the same, taking variables out of, if you're going to be successful in bodybuilding, taking variables out, working out at the same time of day, having a partner that is going to push you, getting the same amount of rest, eating the same types of foods. You do these things to cut out the variables and to make sure that you are knowing how to get it from point A to point B. And so I think golf is crazy data driven, which also is something that I love, is because I can systematically kind of, you know, see progress happening. But there comes a time when all of that data and analyzing and thinking has to go out the window. And you just have to then say, relax, be an athlete, go out there and swing. But I think a pre-shot routine is, if you look at pros, they go through a pre-shot routine. They don't need, it's subconscious. They practice enough to where their pre-shot routine is the same each and every time. And it's almost getting them into that meditative state. Stand behind the ball, visualize your shot, 2 practice swings, 2 steps up to the ball, place it behind. Like if you look at Tiger Woods, his pre-shot is always the same down to the second. It's the same. I think that it's almost getting you into that hypnotic state of, okay, now I'm loose, ready to go. I'm clearing my mind of all thoughts.
That's so good. I mean, so many parallels to anything in life, obviously beyond golf. This idea that, I think for me, I was just reflecting on, I'll be on stage this next week. We have our big annual thing, and I perform. I was lead singer of a band for a decade or so, and I was on stage a lot, and I grew up on stage a lot. And I'm just reflecting on, like, when you're on stage in the moment, like it's not time to be thinking of the circle of fifths and your chord progressions and your music theory. It's time to just let your fingers do the work, or just, and be in that moment and connect with the crowd. And there's a lot going on. That's why I love playing live music, because you're both making noise and listening simultaneously as you're trying to, like, read the vibe and change the room, and you're interacting with other musicians. There's a lot of multi-layered stuff there, but like you had to learn your instrument beforehand. You had to learn your instrument over the last 20 years.
Yeah.
Even the last week, even the last, yesterday in preparation, but not in the moment. And so, and I think, people get frustrated with things like golf or by dirt biking, music, anything in life, because they see someone who's even decent at it and it looks so easy.
It does.
But Tiger Woods, man, if you, a couple podcasts ago, my topic was be Michael Jordan, and these people that make it look easy, they put in the 10,000 hours, the 20,000, the 100,000 hours. And you've done it, of course. Like, I look at your pics on Instagram with a 6-pack and I'm like, but I know what it takes. And by the way, I'm unwilling. Yeah. I'm unwilling to do that. But by the way, I do other things. And I think that's where it's like, roll with it. And I made that choice, and I can't demand a 6-pack like Steve Cook if I'm unwilling to do those things, and that's okay. As long as I've decided it's okay.
Right.
And when people just don't let themselves off the hook,
absolutely,
bad outcomes happen.
Like, again, and when you're talking about the music, I am such a bad singer. If there's one thing, if I had a genie grant me one wish, I wish I could sing, because I think there's nothing cooler than being at a concert. We went to the Coldplay concert in Vegas and seeing him, Chris, what's his last name? Yeah, the lead singer, controlling that crowd. It's amazing to watch and to imagine what that must be like, to where he's almost in this state where he's been there a million times before, but at the same time, you can't get used to having 70,000, or even if you're in a room with 100 people, it's amazing the connection I'm sure that you can have with them. And you're leading something, people are singing along. How cool must that be to have that kind of impact on a crowd? I think that, to me, that, again, everything, I just, it's not one of my talents. So again, it's like, I know that I'm never going to be that person, but
to be, by the way, to be that present, and then to be able to, and that's where it's not just about the negative, aspects of roll with it, to be able to roll in flow state in those moments wherever that is for you, whether it be on a stage, whether it be on a golf course, whether it be, at work, in any capacity. You have to have paid the price ahead of time. You have to have put in the work. And so I love that you have taken it there, because that is also, like, there's nothing like, just this morning, I get up at dawn and go ride. And it was just one of those days where I'm on. I had these days where I, hey, I finished the trail, I get a good workout, but today I was on. And man, I'm moving at insane speeds. It's incredibly dangerous, but it's so fun. And it, it's almost flawless. But I had to do the 1,000 rides to make it look that easy, and I don't always get into a flow state like that. Not every time, at least not that extended. And so when you're in, to then be able to roll with it, and you can achieve things. I have done things with my fingers. So I play keys, on stage playing, because I play live and it's all live. I grew up playing jazz and, you're riffing. I mean, it's the definition of live. You're making up on the spot. And I've done things I'd never known I could do on a stage live when I'm in flow state, like certain licks or things or, progressions or runs or who knows what.
Yeah.
And so there's the rolling with it where you're letting a wave destroy you. There's the rolling with it when you're on the wave, to come back to a surfing metaphor now, which is also a thing I love. And I think, and recognizing when it's one or the other, and those are radically different embodiments of this idea of just rolling with it. But it's just something, the reason these Shawnisms exist is because these are things that run through my head almost every day. And this is one of those.
And that flow state you're talking about, again, whether it's golf, whether it is if you're at the top of your game, and I don't mean a professional, like someone who puts in time, you on a dirt bike, we chase that. And I think it's that beauty of being in the moment, but also not letting the moment kind of consume you and get too big. You're not thinking about anything other than the success of what you want. And I think that that's such an important thing. When you're in that flow state, there's no bad thoughts entering. It's just this idea of I'm seeing whatever it is that I want to happen, and it's going to happen because I'm attracting that into my life.
You're manifesting in real time.
In real time. I think that is flow state. Again, it's just that energy. You're on that same wavelength, and your energy is matching it. And I think that that's what everyone strives for, whether you're a professional athlete or a musician. It sounds like, even in business, I think that you have those moments where your vision comes to fruition. And I think that that's such a beautiful place to be. But again, it's hard you can't maintain that always. It comes and goes and you don't really know how, but you chase that. And when you find it, it's just like, okay, roll with this, go with this, hold on to this as long as you can. And I think it starts with, you are what you think about, or you are what you attract what you think about. And I think that that's why it's really important to have vision boards and thinking about, what you're manifesting and where you're at in life. It's hard to live a positive life while being negative. And I think that that's one of the things that I found, in the last couple of years, I have been, more negative in the sense that, like, on my outlook on life, and with COVID being something that kept my wife and we weren't married at the time, but it kind of kept my wife and I apart. And again, talk about growing with it. I sat around every single day for 10 months while she was in Australia, just depressed, angry at the world that it was closed down, trying to figure out every loophole, blah, blah, blah. And eventually I was just like, okay, well, we're going to have to get you out of Australia. I'm gonna have to get out of the US, and we'll meet. We went to Dubai. And so we just rolled with it for 8 months. We didn't know where we were traveling to because the countries were opening and closing. So we went to Dubai, did a month. We went from Dubai to the Maldives. We went from the Maldives to Greece. We were there the first day it opened up.
Oh my gosh.
And we were there, and then England, Spain.
Sounds terrible, by the way.
Well, yeah. And looking back, it was like, what are you complaining about? I'm a person though that I like some routine, and I like, planning to a certain extent. It's hard for me sometimes to go with the flow, but that was one of those moments, or one of those times in my life when, again, I was fighting, my reality sitting at home in St. George, my wife's in Australia. And eventually when we got the opportunity to travel, now it's like you said, it's a different role with it. It's having to be very easygoing, and in my life, that's what needed to happen in order for me to spend time with, the woman who's going to become my wife. Is that like, hey, we're nomads. We're traveling. We had our videographer with us. We try to make good, cool content because that's what our jobs, that's what our jobs are
Mm,
about. But it was looking back, man. It was like that's an amazing opportunity that I realize we'll never be able to really do again, especially with a little
yes.
one. And COVID, again, it presented itself in a way that we had the opportunity to see Greece
Yeah.
basically untouched for a year. And
Mm,
I think people can look at things and be negative about it, or you can look and pivot and say, hey, like, yeah, okay, I might have to leave, the gym, or there's going to be I'm going to have to pay the price of, maybe I'm not, able to work at the app as hard as I wanted to, but I have to roll with things in order to spend time with my significant other and pivot. And goodness, man, we learned so much about not just different cultures, but about traveling together. And eventually, it led to being like, oh yeah, like we're gonna get married, proposed in
yeah.
Greece. And I look back and I'm like, I wouldn't trade that time now for the world.
Awesome. And there's so much in what you said that I want to unpack, namely out of the gate. Um, Something you mentioned, you love a routine and it's who you are. And so here you are, complaining about Dubai and Maldives and Greece. And then even as you're saying it, you realize, well,
Yeah,
be careful not to wish things away. Even those things that were thrust upon us or these waves that roll over us that we didn't intend, because if you've had enough life experience, you realize you're going to look back and they will be the best times, ironically. And simultaneously, my daughter, my wife, even, these are more rigid people than I am. Like so first of all, I'm a huge believer in Jungian psychology. I was trained in the MBTI. It's the 16 personality types, yada, yada,
mm,
yada. Some people hate that stuff. Some people, I love it because I think it's true. And let me just throw a bucket of cold water on all of us. In the world, like 50% of the people are P's and 50% are J's. And if you understand the Myers-Briggs type indicator, basically these are flexible people, like naturally, like out
yep,
of the womb, and more planful people that are on time, people that are punctual, people that love a routine. My wife is that. I am the opposite. I am like the most extreme. Like we need to go to Mexico now. Okay. You know,
yeah,
and my point being, neither is right, neither is good, but it's real. And so for you to have to, travel to Dubai to see, the person you love and spend that sounds like a dream to some, and it sounds like a curse to others. And so first of all, it starts with empathy,
yep,
both for others and yourself. And back to, I'm always preaching this on this podcast, self-awareness. Do you even know what you are? A P or a J. And if you do, and by the way, if you know these things about the ones you love, it allows you to have a little more empathy and treat them with when you roll your eyes like, you're like, really, you're going to complain about this, but understand like they're wired differently than you.
yeah.
And this is something that's been tremendously valuable in my life. If you've never had the chance, if you're listening, to explore this stuff, just Google Myers-Briggs type indicator, and there's Strength Finder, there's the DISC program, there's all these different versions of it. But it started with Carl Jung, the psychologist, and I believe in this stuff. And my point being, for you, a person who just admitted, you love a good routine, whatever, to develop the capacity to be flexible, to roll with that.
Mm,
And now look at what it gave you. Look at the richness it gave you through what could have been the worst time on planet Earth.
so true. And to your point, it's interesting because I haven't taken that in a while, so I think I need to go back and visit that. Do you think that you, at different points in your life, can not necessarily change, but be more one than the other? Let's say, for
For sure.
my wife loves to travel, but obviously having a baby, there's things now that she,
That's a radical change.
right. And so it's like, okay, yeah, there's something to a routine that also is, hey, like we like having somewhat of a routine for the baby, but realizing that that at the drop of a hat, whether she's sick or teething, it's going to go out the window, and you need to be flexible
Yeah.
with that. So
Well, just wait till you got to deal with schools and things.
yeah.
But right now you guys are in a fun place. Yes, routine is valuable for anyone, no matter what. My point is, we as humans have natural capacities and attractions to certain states. And to some, they just thrive in routine. To other, like I have routines, but I'm not naturally a routine person,
Mm,
and I benefit from having routines. And by the way, we can learn all the things. Rigid people can learn to be more flexible. Flexible people can learn to get a little more, routine based. And both are good. Neither is bad. My point is, they're real. They're
yeah.
not fake. They're not imagined. And the problem is, if you go through life thinking that everyone thinks like you,
Mm.
like, oh, this person is so whatever, fill in the blank. Yeah, they are. Like fundamentally they are. And you don't understand it because that's not your lived experience. Like, how do you and I even know that when we look at the sky, the blue I'm seeing is the same as the blue you're seeing?
That is
We,
wild that you say that. I had this conversation with my wife 2 weeks ago. Like,
yeah,
have you ever thought about the fact that colors are just these made up things? And yes, we know them as orange, blue, but what if my blue is your orange? She
yeah.
looked at me like I was crazy. And I thought, man, am I the only person thinking these types of things? And so to hear you say that is
Yeah,
so funny. I've never really heard too many people have that topic. I think about these things all the time. So I love that. And I am one of those people that again, I like to. I grew up in a big family.
mm,
I'm one of seven. My dad was a government teacher. So at the table, it was discussion. My sister won the speech and debate in the state of Idaho. She's older, and again, she's completely different. We're not going to get too much into politics, but she leans a little bit more left. I like to feel like I'm more of a libertarian. But I think that I love debating and I love talking, and there's a lot of people that makes them very uncomfortable. But I like understanding where people are coming from, and I think that that's one of the things that it really is enrichful has been general curiosity, uh, the psychology of things, and again, getting back to what you just said, it's how people think differently, and I've had to have my own like, hey, don't have to convince people all the time that your way is right, because again,
yeah.
I grew up doing that. I grew up defending my position and also trying to convince other people of my position. But there's a time and a place for that, and I think there's a time and a place to sit back and just appreciate the fact that we all don't think the same.
Well, if you can't tell by this visual, I'm huge into books, and I try to, read all the time, audiobooks, real books, whatever. There's a book on this topic that I love, Jonathan Haidt, The Righteous Mind. This is a book that I wish every human on earth, or at least in America, was somehow forced to read.
Mm,
And it basically, in this book, explores in a very real way, in a very scientific way to some degree, this same idea about personality that I just talked about. And that was one dimension of personality, rigidity versus flexibility. But he talks about how people are also born with their, let's call it political leanings. And it's not actually that exactly. It's more like, for instance, the idea that people need to be cared for versus that people need to care for themselves, as an example, pull themselves up by their bootstraps, which is really offensive to people, to some people, that idea, even where if you're, let's call it on the right, that, what are you talking about? Like that's just the way it should be. And
mm,
my point is, these people haven't just been convinced by modern media to lean one way or the other. They're born to some degree with these points of views, just like they're born kind of more rigid than they are flexible, or more flexible than they are rigid. And once we come to understand that, we can just, I think, be a little easier, both on
mm.
other people, because they're looking at the sky, swearing that it looks one way through their eyeballs,
Yeah.
and also easier on ourselves when we start to understand ourselves at a fundamental level, at like a genetic level, at like a physiological level, psychological level. And we understand that, like, what to you is a wave to roll over you, to me is a wave to ride and
Mm.
have fun on. And once we understand that, man, I think
Powerful.
we can just have an easier life a little bit. Just the understanding of it with the waves both rolling over us
Right.
and rolling for us.
And that makes a lot of sense. Like I'm a big I'm a big fan of like, hey, nothing is 100% nurture versus nature. There's everything's a mixture of the two. But absolutely, I agree with the fact that you're born with a lean or a natural
A preference
predisposition.
is the technical term.
Yeah,
Yep.
preference to one side or the other, and that's why I think it makes perfect sense. And that you have families that my family being one of them, we're all raised the same
Mm-hmm.
parents, going
Yep.
to the same church schools, but
Yeah.
completely different perspective on politics, on
There you
sports,
have it.
on yeah, and so I think that it's living proof that again, two people can see the same thing and have a completely different opinion on that. And how do we as a society, again, not always have to feel like we're shouting over the other one, but we can get into a place where we can say, hey, I don't necessarily agree with you, but I appreciate, because again, that's what makes I think the US, you know, a beautiful place, is that in theory we should be able to open our arms to all different groups and have the ability to be like, okay, that's a different thought, because without that, if we all just had the same views, how boring and we'd all be miserable.
Yeah. Well, The Righteous Mind, one of my favorite books of all time. Check it out if you're listening.
Do you have
I
a
want
good
to.
book list? Is that something that you have on? I'd be super interested in, just because again, I think as I was a biology psychology major, and I think it's one of those things that a lot of people, always workout advice, but I do think it's one of those things. If I had my spiritual pillars, one of those things would be reading, and I think that
Yeah.
that's where as I've gotten older, I don't want to just read fiction. Like I like this. I like kind of almost alternating, going for something that's just pure enjoyment read, and then one that's more of a philosophical. Like, hey, my wife again, she's an avid reader, but ultimately, she's going to read things that are just fun to read. Whereas these to me are fun, but might not be for everyone.
Well, you know what? You inspire me. I'm just making a note of it. I'm going to publish my reading list on
Yes.
social. I do it every now and then. It kind of gets pushed down. But I have a lot to say about that.
Do you
I'm
like
going to do it.
reading books, or are you a e-reader? Looks
Both,
like books. Okay.
both. I try hard to read real books, and I try hard to always be listening, to something.
Podcast in the car,
I
or
do that too. Yeah, yeah. And all good content. What a blessing, to be. And that's the thing. It's like the more you learn or whatever, the more you take in, the more you think you know a lot when you're in your 20s and you're charging forward. And I was like the cockiest, brashest, and that's what gets you somewhere to
yeah.
some degree. But it's like the more you learn you don't know. And
Mhm.
that's how I feel now at my age and stage, even though of course I've read more than most, I think, and whatever. But I want to dial it back to what you said earlier in our conversation about losing the Olympian.
Yeah.
Um, it sounds like a pivotal moment for you. It sounds like, I'm guessing, acres of work
Yeah.
went into that. With it, how do you reflect on that?
Yeah, so it was something to me that was a big turning point, and the reason, because like
Set
it
it up, by the way. Tell us
yeah, so like
what it is for those that aren't into bodybuilding and all that. Yeah.
well, I'll go back even further. So I played college football here at the university where we live in St. George. At the time, it was called Dixie State. Now it's what, Utah Tech. And so my identity was kind of always that that football player, that jock, and was married early on. 19 years old, got divorced 23, and at the time I was kind of lost.
Mm.
Again, kind of went back to what can I control? I can control, and what am I good at? What do I want to do with my life? I was finishing up my degree in biology, psychology, thinking about going to chiropractic school, and I needed an outlet. I'd always loved the physicalness of training and
Mm.
being in the gym, and that's football and the weight room. And so I got into natural bodybuilding shows. Had realized, I had uh, some genetic gifts. Like there's
I
a
had an 8-pack
oh yeah,
and
there's things.
wonderful.
Yeah, there like he talked about, like Michael Jordan. um, he's obviously an amazing athlete and he works hard. I think anyone who's at the pinnacle of their sport has to have some, they have to have some genetical God-given gifts, and then they have to work extremely hard. I'm not going to say I was the best, at either of those, but I was good and got into bodybuilding, got into men's physique, won a lot of competitions, the Muscle and Fitness Male Model Search, and, like I said, natural bodybuilding shows. And so I got into men's physique and, won my first show, qualified for the Olympia, got to the Olympia and I lost. And you can say what you want. Bodybuilding is very subjective, and at the time, like I put my heart and soul, and it was kind of devastating at the time for me to have. Again, it was kind of that identity crisis. Like, oh my gosh, this is who I was. I was the best at this, and I lost it. But I realized quickly what I loved most about it was actually the connections that I'd made. And so, earlier on, before losing that Olympia, I had sponsors, Optimum Nutrition, bodybuilding.com, and my job was literally traveling around the world, standing in a line 8 to 12 hours a day, talking to people at expos about their fitness goals, about the products that, we were selling, bodybuilding.com. I had some programs
Mm.
on there. And that was actually what I realized was more of my calling, was more of like, hey, service, turning that into
Mm-hmm.
competitions are great, but they can be taken away from you. Even if you feel like you should have won, or even
Mm.
if you aren't the best, what no one can take away from you is the fact that serving others, you get the most back from that. And I think that that's where I really built the base of my career on social media and whatnot, was going to expos, talking with people, asking them, genuinely interested in their journey, in their fitness journey, and in life. And just finding common ground with people all over the world. That's cool when you go to Singapore, places you've never been, and immediately you're connecting with people just based upon commonality. And I think that was really cool. And then, of course, social media came about. I'd go to these things, they would snap a picture, maybe post it, make it their profile picture. And that was really how I grew my brand. And now I look
Mm.
at today's social media and think, oh, they got it easy. TikTok, everyone's viral, blah, blah, blah. But at the time, it was really something that was powerful, but I loved it. And so when I lost that Olympia, it was kind of a paradigm shift again from, why am I doing this? It's not to win trophies and accolades. I'm doing this because I like I like having a goal and competing and working towards that. But the larger picture, and what I always try to get back to on social media is, hey, if my image, how I look, might bring people to, whether it's my brand or my social media, I want them to inevitably realize there's a lot more than just looks. When we talk about things, it's kind of like a baby analogy of, if you have applesauce, you put the peas and carrots in the applesauce. So you have the sweet tasting stuff, the visual stuff, but then you have the peas and carrots that are the things that are going to be, nutritious. You have the
Yeah.
tidbits in your business and fitness culture when we talk about, um, be an ornament or be an instrument, not an ornament. Like we want, you might come to the brand because of the visual, but we want there to be a lot more than that, and have a bigger purpose in that. So yeah, losing the Olympia was a massive thing for me that shifted, I guess, my attention and focus. But it gave me a lot, a lot clearer of a picture of where I wanted to go forward from that.
Yeah. Let me extrapolate something from that for people listening, because it's very powerful. You were pursuing this thing for good reasons and with good intentions, and at the very least, a killer breakup bod, the ultimate
True.
okay, not fair, but in that pursuit, and in that moment when you have to roll with it, that wave crashing over you, smashing you down, you've put in, just, I've got to believe, just all the weeks and months and years of clean eating, and it's all the discipline, and only to lose. And you couldn't have known in that moment that you were about to, I think, uncover like your purpose. And now this purpose animates you. And it was the same thing that led you there. It was the bodybuilding. It was, this thing, this path, but it wasn't what you thought when you set out. And this is why I really caution people not to wish it away and to be grateful for the problems you have, because they are tailor made for you. And if you're listening, if you're open, and you can't know in that moment, it's okay to feel overwhelmed. It's okay to feel like crap when we lose, but just have a little spark of faith that it's all for your benefit and learning, because I believe it is. And it may not be that week or even that month or even a year before you discover it. Now look at you now, man. I mean, you're a media, celebrity. You've experienced fame, you've experienced success. You have this killer app, you have gyms, you still got an 8-pack. I'm just having fun. But like, my point is, that's how you got there. And you couldn't have known in that moment. And it was the same for me with Lovesac. We now get to make things that are built to last, designed to evolve. You're experiencing it. You've got our product. You know what I'm talking about. We make cool stuff. I told you, you'll be able to have it the rest of your life if you want to. But I couldn't have known that in the 2 decades of just trying to stay alive in business, having come up on giant bean bags, the dumbest idea anyone's ever had. But now I get the chance to build what I think is going to be a Nike or an Apple or a Google. I'm not even joking. And people probably don't take me seriously. That's okay. But I know what I'm doing. And our purpose does not come to us in a direct way. And we can't know until it finally emerges, and we have to let it emerge. But you can't have it emerge unless you keep going.
I love that. That just made me think of another quote from Finding Nemo, that just keep swimming. And that's powerful to me, that just keep going, just keep swimming. My mom, I remember being in California again, in the midst of all of competing and, doing magazine covers. I'm sure what people looked at online and thought, man, this is awesome. This is successful. Like, young kids probably were like, this is what I want to do. I was completely lost because, again, I didn't have that purpose. I knew, again, like, this is probably right around the time I lost at Olympia. And I thought that was kind of where my value was at, rather than realizing my value is actually more back into that service, helping people get in shape, and not the in shape of like, hey, a 6-pack, but get in shape to where we have healthy data markers, to where we are able to live a life that we've always imagined, playing with our kids and things like that. That is to me. And again, I wouldn't have known that had I quit. And, but you got to keep swimming. And my mom said that to me. And I think she said it because, my mom is just this sweet lady. And that was her way of just being like, hey, instead of being like, pull your, we talked about, pulling yourself up with the bootstraps. It wasn't that. It was like, hey, son, you're doing good. This is part of life. We all have to figure things out. Just keep swimming. Just keep swimming. And I've thought about getting, that tattooed.
I love it.
It's always been such a powerful thing, but it plays into what we're talking about with going with the flow, with, when you get rolled up on a wave and, go with it all. And it's powerful because as you just keep swimming, you find your niche. But what you don't want to do, and what I've done at times, is kind of stand on the bank waiting to jump in because I don't know what to do, what's right and wrong, or business wise or whatever it is. And it's just like, hey man, jump in, start swimming, and keep swimming. You'll figure it out. And
where I commend you, as on the heels of a divorce, probably one of the most devastating things anyone can live through. You channeled it into something. And I don't even know that it matters what that something is, as long as it's not an abject negative. Like, obviously drugs and alcohol is probably not worthy, but you channeled it into, okay, bodybuilding, fine. And now, again, look at the life it's brought you, and you couldn't have known it at the time. And it's so cool to hear you talk about, because people see you on TV or they see you in media. And even in that moment, they might have perceived you one way when inside you're all torn up and lost. As you described, you said, I was lost. But it didn't matter, because at least you had channeled your energy into something positive, and look at the outcome. All these things will be for your benefit and learning. And that's why, we can't wish it away. We can't, accept your problems, because, they're going to somehow, and you just gotta have faith in that. And I just can't, hammer that home enough for people, because we all find ourselves in these moments where we feel lost. But as long as we just keep swimming, and we're doing something positive, I promise you, especially if you're open to it, but you can't demand it. It's just like golf. You can't force it. It might be a week. It might be a month. It might be a year. It might be a decade before that purpose emerges, before that path emerges. Or, by the way, you only see it in hindsight, and all of a sudden, holy crap, I am a celebrity, or holy crap, I do have a following, or holy crap, I do have a successful bodybuilding business, let's call it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's especially important for as a young man, I think part of where I was at going through a divorce is like, hey, I didn't have my life figured out. I wasn't making six figures. All of these things that I think as a society, we start measuring ourselves, and it can quickly become, a lot of pressure, but also feeling like a failure because at 23 or 24, I didn't figure it out. And I think there's that grace that young kids, young people out there, we want them to grow up so fast. We want them to figure it out so fast. And I'm sure as parents, it's all out of love. But how about stepping back and letting kids fail at things and letting people go down a path that, hey, this isn't for me, but let them figure that out. I think that that's important because without that, you're gonna learn those lessons no matter what. So, letting those things happen can be such a positive early on in life. But I can remember definitely thinking like, oh my gosh, this person's going to school and they know exactly what they want to be, this and that, and kind of comparing myself to that. And so that comparison can be, again, we talk about how comparison can be such a negative thing. At times, it can be. I think.
I mean, that's your mantra at Fitness Culture, right?
Yeah.
It's say it.
Well, we have a couple mantras, but
Give us a couple of your mantras.
well, we have like last set, best set. That's one of the things we always say. Meaning,
Love
like
it.
whatever you're doing, currently finish strong at that. But I think that with Fitness Culture, and even with The Biggest Loser on there, it's like, hey, you got to love who you are now. If you don't love who you are now, like the people on The Biggest Loser, we always would talk about, hey, that person who was super overweight at home got you here. If they didn't care enough, you wouldn't be here where you're at training with me now. And I know that there's a lot of things out there. There's a documentary on The Biggest Loser, which I was happy that the seasons I did on The Biggest Loser were completely different than the documentary there. The Biggest Loser had been kind of shut down and then rebooted when I did it. And we did it with a doctor, we did it with psychologists, with people creating care plans for them as they left. But, not to get sidetracked, but we realize with The Biggest Loser, that's a TV show. And when you get down to it, you're always going to have people gaining weight back. But The Biggest Loser was an eye open for me, not only to see like, hey, TV, but also working with people that are super overweight was a lot more rewarding to see them getting back to a place where like, hey, they have a new outlook on life. It's not the vain, I want a six pack and step on stage, which again is good. I learned a lot about my body, but there was also a lot of negative that came from it. And I think in today's day and age, it's easy to look at The Biggest Loser and be like, oh, that show's awful. But really, when you look at it, Ozempic right now and everything else, are you better off, losing weight? Well, yeah, you want to do it in the healthiest way possible. But I think for a lot of people, it was a last resort. It was a last chance,
Yeah.
a last ditch effort.
Yeah.
And I would like to think, hey, even if you gain the weight back, hopefully you learn valuable lessons and you learn how to work and you believe in yourself that you can actually do it.
Yeah. I think you changed a lot of lives through that. And it was obviously an major, piece of your story. And, just to bring it full circle, the one I love from that you've built at Fitness Culture is this idea, as you touched on, always progress, not comparison. Because as we know from Teddy Roosevelt, right? Comparison is the thief of joy. I try to remind my children of this. There's all the things that they can compare themselves to.
Yeah.
But always progress. I love that.
And again, I think progress, I don't want it to always just be physical either. Even if you're progressing, and that's one of the things that with Fitness Culture, I want to do more of like, hey, let's talk about spiritual, mental, physical. There's progress that we can make in that. And sometimes when we talk about balance, we're always striving for this balance, work, family, life. And so there's been times in my life, again, that I've gone all work, no family, being young, trying to make something of myself. And I think in this now where I'm at is set me up to like, hey, where I'm really trying to progress as a father right now, where I'm really trying to progress as a husband and hey, I want to maintain a level of fitness that's important to me. But that part of looking a certain way at 40 years old, I'm not going to look the same as I did at 25.
Not as easy, is it?
No, it's not. But again, like you said earlier, my priorities change. I now, again, look at my daughter or look at people that out there that I want to help get into shape, lose weight to where they're able to play with their kids and add years to their life. Because as I grow up, I realized that, hey, again, from continuing to swim along, you change and you grow. And I think that our past, it got us here, and I can't. Sometimes I look back, I'm like, man, I was such a dickhead. I was, so vain, this and that. That person though got me here. Without
Yeah.
that person, I'm not able to learn from
Yeah.
all of those things. And I think that, again, allowing yourself to just roll with it.
Well, the fact you even say that, I can just commiserate. I feel that way on a daily basis. And oh man, how could I have said that yesterday, this morning, whatever. And I'm saying that for everyone listening, because here you have Steve Cook, millions of followers on social media, fitness celebrity, blah, blah, blah. And these are the struggles that we live with. I'm the face of this public company, whatever. These are the real, this is the real thing. And so the struggles you feel, as for everyone listening, you're not remotely unique. And even some of the most successful people like Steve that you observe feel the same way. I have to ask, and by the way, Steve, what you just described, physical, mental, spiritual, the balance, your realness, this is why fitness culture is, one of the top fitness apps out there. And it's more than just obviously picking things up and putting things down. And I'm really proud of what you've built. As we, in the spirit of Let Me Save You 25 years, you've had this amazing life arc. It's led you to have your own story that's unique, and the timing of it's unique. And you now are enjoying your beautiful child, and, your life's evolved. You've taken us through your journey toward purpose, which, came at you through a side door while you were pursuing what you thought was, the direction. And that's how it works, by the way. That's the path. That's the archetype. In the spirit of Let Me Save You 25 years, what advice do you have for the person, a decade back or whatever, on their own journey, to save them a chunk off their own 25-year?
Yeah, I would, and I always kind of go back to enjoy the journey, because the destination oftentimes isn't what we think it is. We think that
Sometimes disappointing.
Yeah, we think that, whether it's a bodybuilding show, whatever it is, you put these things on a pedestal, and then you actually you achieve what you want to achieve, and there isn't this overwhelming sense of, oh, I've done it, and you realize quickly that it's that day in and day out, that putting in that work that you really love and you cherish. So it's that swimming. It's realizing that you got to that place, that you have to overcome those obstacles. And it's not so much about that physical mountaintop as it was about what you had to achieve to get there. So it's almost just embrace that journey, allow yourself some grace, whether it's in your fitness journey, whether it's in your personal life. No one's going to be perfect. That's not why we're here. We're here to learn from things, and to, again, that little by little progress in those multiple areas of your life to allow you to get to a place to where that you feel like you're better off or you're better understanding other people, whatever it is that you're needing to progress in. Enjoy that journey, because, again, that's where I think the value is the lessons learned on that journey.
I love that. What you thought was your destination was actually just another gas stop.
Amazing.
And if you don't take time to look at the trucker hats, you might just miss something.
Absolutely.
I love it. Well, look, you can follow Steve on Twitter and Instagram at Steve Cook, SteveCook, as I do. Although you will have some body envy, I gotta say, some life envy. But look, check out his incredible fitness programs for anyone, for any body type, for any person at fitnessculture.com. And if you're in the St. George area, be sure to check out one of his amazing gyms, as my wife lives lives and breathes every day. Look, thank you so much to the bodybuilder from Boise, the expert advisor of exercise, the founder of fitness culture himself, Mr. Steve Cook. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Shawn. I really appreciate it.
And remember, to everyone listening, sometimes the best way through life is just to let go, adapt, and roll with it. Enjoy the journey. Just keep swimming. It just might save you a chunk off your own 25-year journey.
Once a year to take my friends away should not be the budget for your bike across America.
TikTok has become an aggregator for some of the dumbest human actions.
When I won that million, I was $2 million in debt, barely hanging